I'm Dr. Elizabeth Nguyen. I'm a multidimensional psychiatrist. Was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. I recently released my first novel, Aloha Vietnam, about a Vietnamese American refugee family settling in Hawaii and dealing with their daughter's bipolar diagnosis and mental illness. I currently live in California, Northern California, in Davis, and I also, besides working in cross-cultural psychiatry, I do a lot of work with the healing power of water and the natural world.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And thank you especially for reaching out because there are so many things that your work, your life intersects with what I wanted to talk about. So it was like perfect timing.
Great, me too. Yeah.
The most important thing right now in people's mind in Hawaii is the Lahaina situation in Maui. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. My heart is heavy with grief to just know about the loss to the fires in Lahaina and the Big Island, mostly in Lahaina on the island of Maui in the recent weeks. I'm currently on Oahu visiting my mother and family who live on Oahu, who thankfully were not affected by the fires. But it's just devastating to see the footage, to know about the loss. And I know that these fires, these extreme weather conditions have been happening all around the world for a while now, and it's going to keep happening because of the climate change crisis that all of us on planet Earth are living in. But when it happens to your own home, your own homeland, it just hits really close. And I think that's probably a message that we all need to really feel into is how close to home do we need to let it get before we start realizing that the planet is our home, that anytime these loss of life and home and habitat and animals happen anywhere on a planet, it really is affecting all of us on our home planet because we're all connected. So, they're still in the early phases of just sifting through the damage, trying to still find missing people, and it's very sad.
I have talked to people in the last week, and there's a lot of people that don't know about this. It's the craziest thing. And so I just wanted to give some context to people who are listening to this podcast that will be released today, that the town of Lahaina used to be Hawaii's capital. And it's a small town of 13,000 people. And I'm sure there's an influx of tourists and people that come from out of town. But it's a small place that the structures were all built by wood, I heard.
Mm-hmm. It's a very historic town, which is partly what was its charm, is just that it was mostly wooden structures that are several hundred years old. There's these ancient banyan trees, some of which I think have survived the fires, thankfully, still of course scarred by it. But unlike other like Waikiki, where there's a lot of like high rises and concrete and glass, Lahaina was still a quaint little town with lots of old wooden structures, which is one of the reasons why it burned down so quickly, especially with the hurricane winds that just whipped through and spread the fires so quickly.
And there's 13,000 people in that town now it burned everything down. I mean, it's unheard of, right?
It's unheard of on Oahu. I mean, in Hawaii. I'm sure there's been other places that have been equally devastated. Entire towns being destroyed by fire or other natural disasters. But yes, the scale is something that we haven't seen in a long time.
Well, I hope that our audience can tune in and find different support links throughout the process of the rebuilding of Lahaina in the next few weeks and months. And I just wanted to call attention to the situation in Maui, and the fires are over, but the recovery of people who have passed away in the fires is ongoing right now, and reconstruction efforts are probably months away.
Yeah. Thank you, Kenneth, for just bringing attention to what's going on there. And I think you know, trying to support those who have been directly affected by the fires is our first and foremost priority. And then really taking that opportunity to reflect on how, if even if we are not directly impacted by this incident, how we are still all impacted, and how we all can take this opportunity to reflect on our own lives, our own contributions, and what is happening in our planet, and what we can do to what we can do about it.
There are quite a few Vietnamese families that live on um, the island of Oahu. Waikiki is the big city there. How did your family get there?
My family came to Honolulu on May 1st, May Day, 1975, because my father had a sister, my father's sister, so my paternal aunt had married an American who was in the military. And so when the news came that Saigon was going to fall, and anyone affiliated with the South would need to try to leave, my aunt's husband, my uncle Bruce, was able to help my family make some quick arrangements to leave Saigon, and we ended up in Honolulu in May 1st, 1975. And I often say that our family won the refugee lottery by ending up in Honolulu. But there weren't many other. There was a small community, maybe several thousand, but compared to other resettlement communities, it was not a major hub of resettlement. People there either knew someone or had sponsorship. So it was definitely a unique, beautiful experience growing up in Hawaii with the Vietnamese American refugee community here.
Yeah, to say it was a lottery win is like an understatement if you think about, the lives that millions of people that were left in Vietnam or had traveled to places that were much tougher. Um, but that being said, though, because I think about this, was it entirely idyllic and heavenly as we on the mainland or other parts of the world would think that a Vietnamese family arriving to Hawaii would have, right? It's probably not as beautiful as we would imagine.
Well, I'm going to answer that saying yes and no, because I think, like any other Vietnamese American refugee family, there were struggles. There were struggles that are, common to all of us in the diaspora, and common to any immigrant family, especially a refugee family, trying to just start their lives new in a foreign land with, like, even though my parents and my family were privileged enough to come over by plane, they had nothing. We started with nothing. So everything they built was from the ground up. So it was still challenging, but I would say that I still answer that question that yes, we did win the refugee lottery, because every time I come home to Hawaii now, even though I live most of my life in California, there's something about being on the islands that, even if you're struggling with everything, there's something really special about the Hawaiian Islands, that just living here is a gift that I don't take for granted, and I really feel is a special thing, which is why these fires are really, just heartbreaking.
Something I really didn't think about much until I met a dear friend of mine, Anderson Lay. He's of the Lay family with Pig and Lady and Piggy Smalls in Oahu. Uh, the one thing I didn't think about much was until I met him, I hadn't been to Hawaii. And once I met him, and he runs the Hawaii International Film Festival. And when I got to Hawaii, I didn't realize, I was completely ignorant to the fact that it's predominantly Asian looking people on the
Mhm.
island. But having that physical characteristic that we blend in as Vietnamese people, is there sort of an ease to the fact that there's all these Asians and we blend in? Or,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I'd love to answer that. Yeah, it's I would say yes. There was an ease to growing up in a place where as a Vietnamese American, you look like you fit in, you look like a local. And there isn't that same discrimination against Asians that I feel that other people in my generation and older experienced on the mainland or resettlement places where there was a minority of Asians. But I would say there's also an unseen and unspoken um, sort of challenge in that too. Is that because you look like you fit in, you aren't given any sort of everyone just assumes you know what you're doing. And as I feel like as a Vietnamese American refugee family, and I write about this in my book, the main character one at one point says like, everyone thinks I'm local, but I'm really not. Like, I have no idea what's going on. My parents have no idea what's going on. We're not like a fourth, fifth generation Japanese, Chinese American family in Hawaii. And so there was both this like ease of like, we look the same, so we're not discriminated against, but the internal experience of not fitting in and maybe not even knowing that you need extra help because you don't look like you need extra help was an added challenge.
and you must run into plenty of Asian Americans in California. The West Coast has, an abundance of community here, Asian American community. And do you ever sort of like hear other people's stories of growing up throughout the country, the mainland, and compare it, the difficulties or the ease in which your life was in Hawaii? And can you share some of that? Because I always find it interesting to be an American speaking English in a place where it's predominantly Asian people.
Yeah, I think like you, Kenneth, I just love hearing other people's stories, especially other Vietnamese American families, and because I want to understand how my experience was unique or similar or different than others. And um, I would say that I, coming from Hawaii, growing up Vietnamese American in Hawaii, was uniquely different than Vietnamese Americans that I've talked to in California when I speak to people I met in college or afterwards. There's just, and it's so hard to sometimes explain what is different. I think a lot of it is around place. Hawaii is a special place that's very tied to the land. You wake up and you always know where the mountains are and you always know where the ocean is just because you can probably see it. It's that small. I feel like when I live in California now and my first time there going to college, I was just so struck by how big it is. Like you could just see the land stretching and I'm like, which way is the ocean? Which way is the mountain? I was so disoriented because those markers of growing up in Hawaii, where you can always see the mountains, you can always see the ocean, were so grounding in me. And I think every person who grows up on the islands has that without them even being conscious of it, of just like being so rooted to the island itself, the land itself. Um, and in California, I mean, I've lived there now half my life, maybe more than half my life. So it's become a part of me too. And there is a different, unique culture to California. California life, there's just I don't know what to say about it besides, there's lots of retail and strip malls. And there's beautiful landscape as well, but there's actually very beautiful landscape, but it's very different than Hawaii, which feels very, very like cozy and tropical.
Recently, I had another guest. Her name is Dr. Vingo. She is a doctor as well as a fine artist. And, it was like one of the first times I had a doctor and an artist on. And then you reached out as an author and as a doctor. The intersection of art and the medical world is very fascinating to me because it's almost like the way my artist community talks about growing up we were pressured, and it feels very binary sometimes, like our parents were like lawyer, doctor, or artist. But now I'm starting to find out that, hey, there are people in the medical field who are accomplished writers and accomplished artists. And I want to talk about that intersection. I want to talk about what went on in your childhood to keep you on track with the medical track. And then, did you always have this itch to write and become an author?
I love this question, and I love that there's more of us now showing that it's not so black and white. That even as we, in my family, like many traditional Vietnamese American families, it was like you're going to become a doctor and a lawyer, and I just sort of like I was like, okay, let me explore those two and see which one fits better. And I, you know, interned with a doctor. I'm like, oh, I could see myself doing this. And I always wanted to write. I always wanted to be a writer. I have written ever since I got my first journal in fourth grade, and I think I wrote like a story or something even in elementary school. I just loved writing, but it never even entertained my mind. I wasn't one of those rebel childs who was like, I'm gonna fight for this, chance to become a writer. I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna do what my parents tell me, and then I'm also gonna just like keep doing this thing that's such a part of me. And I think I went into psychiatry because it's about listening to people's stories, and writers are about storytelling. And so there was a natural fit of, oh, I found even within medicine a place where I can really develop my innate interest in storytelling and listening and just being so curious about people's stories and still writing about them. So I've always wanted to write a book. And then I wanted to share a story of what it was like to grow up Vietnamese American in Hawaii. And I wanted to share, what a family's journey is navigating through mental illness. There was mental illness in my own family. I sit with families all the time navigating mental illness. These are stories that I felt wanted to be brought to awareness so people can really hear them and share them and learn from them. And I would have to say that even though I'm both. I am a doctor and I am a writer. I still do feel like the pool, like I want to be more creative. I want to have more creative time to paint, to really just create. And there is still this dichotomy of like, you kind of have to have a foot in both worlds. So I'm still navigating it, is what I'm saying.
My suspicion for humanity is that given a choice to do art and be creative, or do something high powered like being a lawyer or being a businessman, or I feel like most of us would choose the creative path. I don't know. It just seems much more liberating and much more, you feel alive when you're doing things that are, creative. It just feels more aligned with like our angel side, if you will. I don't know how to explain that.
Well, I think all humans are creative, and to be healthy, we need to be tending to, nurturing, and expressing our creative side. I personally believe that if humanity is to make it through this climate change crisis and live sustainably on our planet, that we're going to need to bring creativity into those high-powered industries of business, finance, education, or just all the systems, healthcare. Because right now, people feel like they have to choose one or the other. So they either have to, like do what the system tells them to do and make a good living, or they can really, nurture their creativity and be their unique talents and express what their genius. And the answer is we actually need all of that in these industries. We need more creativity in education, healthcare, business. Every industry needs people actually doing their unique creative selves, and I believe that's what's really going to get us out of this mess, is not this binary You
Yeah.
got to choose either the old way or being true to yourself. Like, can you be true to yourself and make a living in a way that's good for everyone? Like, I think that's our task.
It's hard because there's confines to a field like the medical profession, being a doctor. It's not like, I want to hand off my body to somebody who's only doing like 4 to 8 hours a day in the medical field. I want somebody who's gone through 18 hours and heavy rotations in their hospitals, right? There's a reason why this exists, or people who are specialists who dedicate their lives to really figuring out a cancer or something like that. So I find it hard to to agree that it's you can't do both almost. And there are people who are just dedicated solely to the fields that they're dedicating their lives to, but for the most part it's like society is set up this way. And I think what you're saying about financiers that need to get creative to help the climate change problem, I could see that. But there's fields certainly like cancer doctors, again, going back to that, I would hope that those men and women are really focused in that field.
No, I hear you. I hear you. That, there's a surgeon that's going to operate on me.
Yeah.
I want that surgeon to like be spending time in the OR, and
Yeah.
there's someone flying my plane.
But I want to
Yeah.
go into your journey, into why you picked psychiatry. But before we get to that, and please remind me because my mind jumps all over the place when I'm sitting in front of people. I want to know your thoughts, and this might be controversial, and I don't know how uncomfortable it is for you to talk about it, but psychiatry and pharmaceuticals.
Mm.
As a practicing psychiatrist, do you think this has all gotten out of hand? Can we work? Okay, good. I'm seeing you nod your head. Okay, yeah, please go. No.
Yeah, I've gone through my own personal journey as a psychiatrist, as a diagnoser, as a prescriber, and then now I say I'm a multidimensional psychiatrist because I've come to realize that medicine, psychiatric medicines, where they're at, do have a role in alleviating suffering for people and sometimes managing crises and symptoms. But there it has completely gotten out of control how psychiatry, modern psychiatry, the whole system around diagnosis and then just throwing on medications and trying medications to alleviate symptoms. And there was a time when I actually was thinking, like, do I walk away from psychiatry because I just can't practice like this goes against my own ethical, moral views of do no harm. Like, I am being like, my profession tells me like this is what I should do, and I don't feel like I'm doing good. I feel like I'm doing harm. But I have found my way. I have found my way through it, I think, partly by trying to do what I just said earlier, which is trying to bring my unique creative self into my practice of psychiatry. So I'm bringing in my spirituality. I'm bringing in my connection to water and the natural world as other healing modalities in the room alongside my prescription pad and medication toolbox, which at times can be very useful for people on their journeys. What I often tell people is that us humans, we've gotten ourselves into a really big mess. And so sometimes to get out of that mess, you need to use kind of the same sort of like powerful medicines and tools to get you out of it. So some of the mental illnesses we see these days are so sort of downstream imbalances of human health and wellness. And sometimes because we've gone so far off that downstream, you need actually heavy hitting medications to kind of start bringing things back into balance. So it's like if you've got cancer, you need sometimes really strong medications to kind of to fight that. Same with mental illness, that sometimes when things are so severely out of balance, we do need powerful medications to get things back into balance. But bigger picture, wellness focused. No, I don't think these pharmaceutical medications are healing by any means. I think they are a crutch and a tool to for a time being to as someone's on their healing journey.
One of my good friends is an 80-year-old psychiatrist, and we've had many lunches to talk about the pharmaceutical industry and how destructive it is. And I wonder where the line is actually drawn. And I don't mean in your mind, but the line of, it just keeps getting pushed back or forward, depending on how you're looking at it, with the money that comes from the pharmaceutical companies. And it just doesn't feel like it's ever going to go back to where it was 10 years or 20 years ago, because the pharmaceutical companies are so powerful. And it just seems like it is a dire situation for Americans all across the country. Is this going to ever improve?
I think things are going to continue to get worse everywhere across the board until they get better. And I think it's not just psychiatry. I think it's, you look at any field in medicine, it's the same thing. Humans allow themselves to get really out of balance and really sick before they decide, okay, I need to do something for my health. I need to, take better care of myself. I need to eat better foods. I need to move my body. I need to really focus on health and wellness. So it's, the pharmaceutical industry is definitely a profit-driven machine, but it also perfectly fits into the human psychology of where we're at. The only reason the pharmaceutical industry is so successful because most humans are lazy. Most humans don't really want to do the hard work it takes to be healthy. So they would rather just continue all their unhealthy habits until they are in need of some major intervention. And then they're like, all right, give me a pill because, I really can't change my lifestyle. I mean, this is like really gross characterization. There obviously are people who are, doing the lifestyle changes and really seeing the bigger picture. But the main reason that the pharmaceutical industry has such a hold on us humans is because most of us aren't willing to do the hard work to change our own habits, our own lifestyle, our own being aware of everything that we're doing to ourselves is causing, the heart conditions, the cancer, the mental illness. It's all multifactorial. No one is doing one thing to cause that. But I think we humans are just as responsible for saying, give us the easy way out, give us the pill.
Society's become so complex. But when I think about the Vietnamese culture and the old country, the place that our parents come from, both mentally and physically, I think of more simpler times. And I think that they were not understanding of mental health, and they didn't, even to this day, I think there's a major shortage of psychiatric services or psychological services in Vietnam. But today, do you work with Vietnamese families within psychiatry or psychology and therapy? And what's your read on the landscape?
Yeah, so I used to work at a Asian Pacific Community Counseling, which is a community mental health organization that serves the Asian American Pacific Islander community across, all ethnicities and cultures. So not just Vietnamese, but all AAPIs. And I worked there for 7 years, and I found it was so meaningful because I felt like this is really what, I'm uniquely designed for. I can speak the language, I know the culture, I can really help to translate the Western view into, helping these families accept treatment. And then, as with so many nonprofits, there became just issues. There became issues with leadership, with finance, and all these nonprofits doing this work, I feel, are just barely scraping by, always. Like this always seems like a fringe cause. It never gains quite enough momentum to become like, yes, like we need this shouldn't be like people working overtime and like taking money out of their own pockets to like help families. Like there just was not enough support. There was not enough community support and resources to maintain this as a sustainable um, system. And so, I just couldn't continue working in this way because the leadership and the community support didn't seem like a sort of airtight enough system to continue to provide care. So I currently have a private practice where I, work with my clients in a way where I feel like I can really provide the care to them. And I say that it still weighs heavy on my mind though, because I know that there's still so many underserved AAPI families who are struggling with mental illness of the most severe type, and the cross-cultural barriers to them receiving services is still there. Like we still haven't broken through that yet.
Yeah, it's, I sometimes I'm in the community and I see like, well, when I think about this stuff, it's like visually we can see when somebody breaks their arm, they're in a cast or they're in, they're bandaged up or they get a cut, and we could see the physical machinations of the wound,
Yeah.
the injury. But you could also, as a professional, I'm sure you could probably sit with a few people and you can see, holy shit, you are broken, and I could see the mental bandages or the trauma that. But in the Vietnamese community, it's like there's a lot of us that are walking around like that are completely, because when I talk about mental health with my mom, she's like, what? You call that mental, like that's a mental illness to you? Like that's just a really messed up person. That's just a really bad person. I go, no, mom, that person was hurt somewhere. That person down the line, early on in their life, when they were like 5 years old, something happened for that person to turn out. Usually, right? I mean, and it just seems to happen a lot that we just don't really see in the Vietnamese community. But has that improved?
I'd say it has improved. Like I definitely, see the next generation. I'm a child psychiatrist, so I see children and young adults and college age students as well as, adults and seniors. So I really see this multi-generational lifespan of what the generations have gone through, like my grandmother's generation who have mostly like have passed on or are nearing that. My parents' generation who have also like in that passing on, you know, I'm in my 40s to kind of just to place myself. And then my generation, who is, I was born and raised in America, the one and a half, the two, second generation, and our children. And I really do see that there has been, a transformation of the trauma that that our people have gone through. There is like an evolution in each generation of the trauma and how it affects each generation. I think in terms of water a lot. So I think that like there has been a dilution. There has been a dilution of the trauma with each generation. And I'm hopeful that that will continue along, not hopefully not with a dilution of the the values and the unique culture that makes us Vietnamese, but with this just sort of evolution of our evolution as a species, not just for Vietnamese, but for humans. I think if you, as Vietnamese Americans, we're talking specifically about Vietnamese, but I sit with other ethnic groups from their own lineages of trauma. And again, there's that parallel process of enlightening of the trauma in each generation across all race and ethnicities, that I think is a story of the human evolution that that we've all of us, all humans right now, we have come from hardship and challenge and trauma, mostly inflicted by ourselves on each other. Most of the trauma has been human inflicted. And so we're still learning from that. And each generation, I think, is improving.
As you're listening to these stories of trauma, or you're sitting in rooms where kids, your child psychiatrist, and you're hearing all of this like tough things that are happening, where do you have a support system to release all of that destructive energy?
The main thing that comes to mind as soon as you asked that was Mother Earth. Is Mother Earth. And that's where I personally have a practice of really using my relationship to the natural world as a place for me to reground and rebalance and release. And that's something that I teach my clients to do as well, because it's something that's available to us all the time, always. What is scary is that we are destroying our natural habitats so quickly that you don't, when you're feeling like you just need a break from life, going to a concrete strip mall is not going to provide that same release as it is going to like a park, even just a simple city park with some open green space. There is a difference in your sense of peace and connectedness and calm that you can achieve when you can really reconnect to the natural world. So that's one place that I use as a support. And then of course also just like my own self-care with, my own, family and friends and my own wellness practices.
Where did you learn this holistic side? Because I can imagine going through the Western training, it probably is not acknowledged or even perhaps frowned upon. When did you start to incorporate it, and what inspired that incorporation?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you asked was, when did I start feeling that? And I felt that as a young child in Hawaii. I think, us Vietnamese are so superstitious about, karma and soul and destiny. And so I was like, there's a reason I'm here in Hawaii. There's a reason I was born here in Hawaii. I always felt this really strong connection to the ocean, especially in Hawaii. Even as a young child, I remember just like always, if I was struggling with something, I would just go to look at the water, go into the ocean. And it felt like it was a natural cleanser, a natural filter that just cleaned and cleared everything. So as a young child, that was where I felt it from the beginning. But then there was a long period of going through just the traditional medical training system for over a decade where it wasn't about that at all. It was just about learning traditional Western models of medications and treatment. And then, after I graduated and started developing my own practice, I just felt this conflict inside me again of like, do no harm. And I just felt like I feel like I'm not really serving my patients by just treating them the way I was taught. I really feel like I'm not really facilitating their wellness. So I kind of just step by step started honoring my own soul's path by bringing back what I found and experienced to be helpful in really helping people feel well again.
People who are listening can't really see the way you move your hands and close your eyes, but that was like one of the first things I picked up on. Are you visualizing certain things, certain ways of describing things to me or to the people that you're seeing? It just reminds me of you being in meditation or prayer when you're talking. I mean, it's a lot of this, and I picked up on it because I can see that it's almost like you're forming thoughts, but in a way that you're tapping into a different source. Is that, can you talk about that at all?
Absolutely. I feel like I close my eyes and do this motion a lot when I'm channeling. When I'm just like channeling energy or words that want to be expressed through me, but that I'm not really the one trying to think about how to answer the question. I'm really just allowing what wants to be expressed through me to come through me. And that's really how I view my healing work as well. When I sit with a client, a patient in the room, it's like I open this energy for us to really access healing. And if someone wants healing, and I'm like, we're here for healing, whatever, because healing doesn't come from me. I tell people healing doesn't come from me, and it doesn't necessarily come from you either. It's like this energy that will come in and reach those places that want to be healed from this ultimate source, wherever that ultimate source is, this ultimate source of creation that wants things to be harmonized as the cycles on the earth. Things want to be in harmony. And if we open the space and allow that to rebalance and reharmonize, it will. So if you're open to opening that space within yourself, and I'm open to letting that energy come through the space we hold together, that energy will just come through and help heal, which means really to help rebalance, reharmonize, open up things that just need to happen in order for the energy to rebalance and reharmonize.
Okay, first of all, I want to just put it out there. I hook, line, and sinker, I completely agree with you. Right? I'm just going to put that out there. And then I'm going to make a quick left turn, hard left turn here into our conversation, because you're a combination of traditional medicine and what you just said in the last minute about letting energy flow through you reminds me very much of my experience in ayahuasca. And I want to ask you if you've ever had any experience with ayahuasca, with researching it, with learning about it, or any healing techniques that are close and similar using plant medicine.
I love plant medicine. So I love that you brought up ayahuasca. I just sat an ayahuasca ceremony for the first time about a year ago, and I've sat maybe in 4 ceremonies since then. And it is one of the most powerful medicines I have received. I work a lot with psilocybin medicine as well. And I also feel like the plant medicines of psilocybin and ayahuasca, those are the 2 that I have personal experience with. There's many other plant medicines that I haven't experienced yet, but I'm sure plant medicines from the earth are a part of this ecosystem of our planet that is hurting and that wants to heal. And these plant medicines are a part of that. They grow from the earth and they want to be a part of the healing. And us humans are a part of this ecosystem as well. And if we open ourselves to becoming a part of that ecosystem again, connected to that ecosystem that these plant medicines are connected to and have wisdom to, then we open ourselves to healing with them and also then becoming a part of the medicine that they are. So we kind of join them. We kind of join forces with them energetically and with our consciousness. So I lost sort of track of the question, but we can continue to dive further.
Yeah, let's dive further because this is awesome. I didn't, obviously many times I don't do deep dives before I go into conversation. I trust that there's intersections in things I want to talk about, and then we start. But then when I start reading the people that are sitting in front of me, I start to have questions that they fit similar patterns of my experience, right? And so the way you move reminded me very much of the my ex-wife is in that space. She's probably done many ayahuasca ceremonies. She goes to probably 3 or 4 a year for the last few years. So I'm attuned to the vibration of people who attend ceremony. So that's what I was feeling. So I came for Aloha Vietnam, for the book, for the medical, these intersections, Maui, but here we are. And this is so important.
Yeah,
This is so important to talk about
this is so
because
important.
this is super important. I mean, this is
Is.
probably the, I don't know, the universe saying, hey, we get that there's these intersections, but this is the main road right here. Um, and the reason I say that is because you are Western trained and your peers, your world in the Western side probably is now opening up to psilocybin, to ayahuasca, to all of these things that we can't see and identify and have very little research on. Where do you stand in terms of the spectrum of all the way west, all the way east? How do we mitigate and make sense of these practices?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're here because I also feel like this is where we're supposed to be. And I would say we are supposed to stand firmly rooted in ourselves, on feet on the ground on planet Earth, really honoring our truth. So, when you say fully east or fully west, those again, external systems and paradigms that have been formulated by other people about what is east and what is west. But I would say that my answer to that question is that everyone, if they stand firmly rooted in themselves, connected to the earth, honoring their unique heritage, what is true for them, that is going to be the healing for each individual and the healing for communities and for our planet. And so I was just sitting in ceremony, psilocybin ceremony last weekend when I got such the strong message that I am in service to the planet Earth, to Mother Earth, and to the psilocybin medicine. And I'm going to do whatever it asks of me just to serve my role. And I don't really even know what fully that role is. I know that I'm supposed to hear it. It led me to having this conversation with you and talking about, this plant medicine. We talked about where is the mental health for our Vietnamese American community, for our AAPI community, for our mental health communities. And plant medicine, even though it's been practiced by indigenous cultures for thousands of years, is only beginning to be opened into the Western model of mental health treatment. So it's an infancy stages. And I think there's a really powerful opportunity for a lot of this healing, for all this trauma, this ancestral healing. So I think ayahuasca and psilocybin are such powerful medicines for ancestral, collective, generational trauma and healing. But we're still trying to figure out how to actually deliver that and receive that with integrity, so that it doesn't become just another pharmaceutical grab like the pharmaceutical companies now. So this is a really interesting dynamic time to just be on planet Earth figuring all this stuff out.
Do you ever talk to your family or your Vietnamese contacts about this? Because it's so left field for, I just started to expose my mom, a few years ago, and, she's opening up and she's being open to the conversation. But what's your experience?
I have not talked to my immediate family about psychedelics yet. My pulse is that they just wouldn't really they wouldn't really know what I'm talking about, really. I belong to several, BIPOC communities that are, practitioners that are trying to see how to bring this to our communities. And I would say there's still a lot of shadow work being done in the psychedelic community, which is just necessary. When I say shadow work, I mean that humans have work that we all need to look at, like stuff within ourselves and each other. And you can't bypass that work. So even if you all of a sudden have this sacred medicine that you're like, wow, like this could really be so helpful, because the fact that humans are involved in it and the whole distribution of it, there's all this human shadow work around capitalism and profit and power and privilege and competition. Everything that humans struggle with in our family lives and our personal lives shows up in every space we enter. And it's showing up in the psychedelic field as well. So even though you have these sacred medicines, these pure sacred medicines, they are not immune to human contamination with our consciousness and our problems. So I would say in the psychedelic space, we are actively, from my experience, still working through human shadow work, which is going to be necessary in order for us to be as clear and pure vessels for this medicine as the medicine itself is. That's the beauty of the medicine itself. Medicine itself is a pure medicine, but once it enters through a human channel, either as the person to hold the ceremony space, to deliver it, it becomes contaminated by human consciousness and human shadow. And so that's where I feel like the field is still at.
Yeah. And I have a kind of a slightly different perspective about plant medicine sometimes when I think about mushrooms and ayahuasca. I feel like they're the key to the gym, like a gym weights, right? You can get the keys to unlock the room to go into, but there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of conditioning and a lot of work that you have to do once you get inside that gym. It's a simple analogy, but it's not like you get into the room and your body works itself out. It's you don't like work the pectorals or your biceps by itself. They're not going to work on itself. Just because you're in the gym doesn't mean that the work is being done. You have to unlock it. You have to find a way to get into that room. And then once you get into that dimension, the work begins, because then you can start processing all of that information that's coming up in the room. And then you can start working out.
I love that analogy. I love that analogy of once you get in the gym, you still need to do the work. Like I will just add, though, that the beauty of partnering with plant medicine is that there is a bit of, there's a lot of surrender that is required. That seems a little different than Western models of psychotherapy that I've learned, which is that, Western psychotherapy is like, like traditional CBT is like you have homework you have to do, or even insight oriented is like you kind of have to do this endless processing, which to some extent I have found is helpful even in when you have the gym to plant, you have the key to the plant medicine gym. Kind of still need to work through our psychological processes and understand yourself. But I feel like as you do it more and more, and it probably is like a progression, but as you do it more and more, you realize the surrender piece of, I don't have to work so hard at this. I do, it's more about like surrendering and partnering with this process. Still does, it's still a lot of work, but it's a different way of doing the work that I think takes a while for people who are used to a much more action-oriented model of healing than plant medicine actually requires. And
you've been in this world for a year, right?
I've been in the ayahuasca world for a year. I've been in the psychedelic world for maybe about four years, like right. with other psychedelics.
Well, I'm going to make a request. I'm going to make a request that sometimes next year, as you get more into this, that we come back and we have a deeper discussion, because it does deserve its own episode of talking about this, right? Because we just stumbled upon this conversation, and we're here really to talk about your book. But I feel so blessed that we got to scratch the surface, and perhaps in a few more months or next year, we can get back on and really do a deep dive when you're ready, and you feel like you have more experience and you have more maybe a development in the legal process of these scheduled
Totally.
um,
It,
quote
yeah,
unquote.
I'm wrapping up a year-long training program in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and we're waiting for the legalization process for MDMA and psilocybin to come through in California and federally. It's already legal in Colorado and Oregon. So I think in a year the landscape's gonna be different. Sounds great to like reconnect, talk specifically maybe about psychedelics for Vietnamese Americans and for Asian Americans. I would love to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's get into Aloha Vietnam. What is up with that title and what is the content? What's the story? How did it all come to life?
So, Aloha Vietnam is a novel. It's the story of a Vietnamese American refugee family that ends up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and it follows their journey just of settling and resettling in the new land. And then their adolescent daughter Aang, develops symptoms of a mental health condition and is diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her senior year of high school. And it follows the family's journey of trying to navigate mental health and treatment and what it means for the daughter, what it means for the family. And it kind of just follows that story. Aloha Vietnam, the title itself I chose because I think one of the main themes of this story is around how unprocessed loss and grief shows up in our families, and doesn't necessarily cause mental illness, but can be a big contributor to mental health symptoms and mental illness. And so aloha in Hawaii means, in the Hawaiian language, means both hello, it means goodbye, and it also means love. And for the story that's told alternatingly between the points of view of the mother Swan and the daughter Aang, it really is this theme of how the mother Swan and many of our parents' generation, they didn't really feel like they had a proper chance to say goodbye to Vietnam. It all happened so quickly for some people. Like we just had to leave, or even even if it was years later, it was never really a proper goodbye. We didn't really get to say goodbye to Vietnam, and I feel like that experience really is heavy in our diaspora of this unspoken grief of not being able to properly say goodbye to this motherland we love so much. At the same time, immediately being thrown into starting a new life and just starting over. So at the same time, we didn't get to say goodbye to our motherland. We didn't really have a proper like welcoming and hello to our new life as well. It was kind of just like, just go. And all of this unprocessed stuff ends up in our family histories, in our emotions, in our unspoken grief. And so aloha means both hello, it means goodbye, but it also speaks to the love. And I feel like love is the highest healing energy that really allows us to go back even now, almost 50 years later, to heal whatever still needs to be healed from these experiences. It's all have carried on. There's no doubt that Vietnamese are resilient people. We've all carried on, but there's still areas that need to be healed. And this book was meant to be a message, a vessel for healing, for it to speak to all those areas. Even though it's one family story, it was really meant to touch Vietnamese people everywhere and to touch them in places where they might still need some opening and healing and understanding, especially between the generations.
And readers who want to find the book, where can they find it?
They can find it, anywhere books are sold, independent bookstores. It's on Amazon, but anywhere you buy your books, you can buy it online.
Elizabeth, thank you so much today. As I said, came for the Hawaii story. I came for your medical insights and the intersection of these topics, but something new was born out of the conversation, which is the future of healing as it relates to plant medicine. Thank you for opening up and really diving into it. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Thank you. I look forward to speaking to you again soon, too.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. Special thanks to Brittany Tran, to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast.